there's this thing called Facebook Watch, which is their video service that they're just starting to monetize. Instagram TV will follow suit, not too far behind. So there will be today, like just speaking to the talent, I mean, you've got major movie stars actually very aggressively marketing and promoting themselves in these ecosystems. So Will Smith, Dwayne Johnson, and Zac Efron going down the line. And the reality is they're paid for their promotion, right? No one hired Dwayne Johnson to be in the movie. He's paid because he can reach millions of people and excite ticket sales. So it does have a loop to it, right? It does have a feedback loop to it.
How about Google? What do they provide, if anything, to getting your products out?
If you have the right talent, they'll pay. I mean, they're underwriting Alex Rodriguez. They've got Will Smith going. They underwrote some of the stuff that went into the initial launch of that channel. Now at some point it's got to be self-sustaining. I think, look, the biggest disconnect between traditional and what we'll call this ad-supported short-form digital, because I think Netflix and Hulu are the same thing. They're just it's how they're delivered. Is this? This is the largest embodiment of independent artists. Right? They don't ask anyone to upload, they don't talk to anybody, so they look differently, right? These video game guys that have everyone upset look and act completely differently than a traditional talent. The family channels, they don't look like anything that you'd see on Disney Channel, right? Or Nickelodeon. They're a completely different set. But the reality is you got now, given the reach that these platforms have, there's a lot of people making $1 million a month or more. And they have real legal needs, and they have a ton of contracts that they're looking to do. And so on the indie producer side, just the producers that are doing it, there's a lot of companies doing really well, but their cost structure is different, their legal structure is different, everything about the way they operate is different. They don't have an executive in charge of production and a head of post and a this and a that. When you add it all up, you're like, I can't make a living. They're somebody with a camera who came up with an idea, probably in a garage or in some like low budget environment. And when they hit 50 million and 100 million and so on views, which a lot of them do, suddenly it's raining cash. And for us, the biggest challenge we have as somebody dealing with this is actually convincing them to get professionalized, right? It's the hardest thing to tell somebody who we just wrote $1 million check to in a month to say, hey, can you hire like 4 people so you can actually respond to the brand deal and do it professionally? So it's a completely different creator class. But it is, disrupting traditional television in a pretty profound way.
All right, so I read about the king of Fortnite who's making beaucoup dinero, which is mixing 2 different languages. And he plays this Fortnite, which is like remarkably successful company. How does he make his money?
Tips. So there's like in Twitch, there's a few things. You buy digital goods, there's tips, and then there's his advertising partnerships. And like, look, it seems totally like out there that somebody could be making tens of millions of dollars a year doing that. But what you got to realize, for him to sustain that #1 position, I think it's like 70 hours a week he's streaming. It's a lot of lawyers here probably aren't putting in those kind of hours. I mean, he is putting in crazy hours to literally maintain that connection with the audience. But he's massively important, right? So he's important to brands who want to reach this audience. He's important to musicians.
He's got advertisers, meaning that goes to him, or is he sharing it with Google?
Well, in the case of this guy, I think who you're talking about is I'm blanking. Yeah, Ninja. He's on Twitch, so that's a different platform, right? So that's a streaming platform. It's owned by Amazon. It's got people are watching. He's streaming 8+ hours a day, so people are watching, coming in segments of 50,000 at a time, are coming in and watching him sort of do his thing.
And real quick, and to Reza's point earlier, and continue on this one, where these individual creators are making so much money that they then have to become small companies of themselves with hiring employees, but we're still talking about a relatively small, handful of employees with really low overhead to make the financials work for them. A company like mine and where I work, with such a large overhead and footprint, as we're looking to get into digital and our own channel, it's how can we justify a lot of these costs that we have to incur with the amount of revenue coming in, knowing that we have this large overhead and footprint that we have to cover. And I think that's been the challenge as we've been trying to figure out as a bigger company how to get into that on our own, creating our own short form content, whereas these individual creators can have super low overhead. It's one person doing 5 different roles, and they're small businesses, but there's only 3, 4, 5 people in them.
One of the
they're actually, and I don't mean to cut, substantially larger businesses than that, and I don't.
No, and some of them really are.
We're also seeing though, like there's a company, Soul Publishing, based out of Cyprus. It's the most interesting. They do kids content. They do about 6 billion monthly views, and they do it in multiple languages. They have like 300 people working. Now it's Cyprus, but it's English and whatnot. And we're seeing more and more of these production groups that started with the kernel of an idea. None of it's talent driven. There's not, there's hosts, but very limited talent who are creating all kinds of different content. What the challenge you guys face is you don't have a sales organization. So if you're going to take on the traditional cost structure, you got to have branded content sales and media sales to drive it, and that's expensive. So that's where a lot of losses occur as you scale. So it's one of those things, if you have to build it and they will come, is the hope, and it's super high risk. But if you start small and just incrementally grow, there's a lot of people now building substantial businesses focused in the production space, but they don't approach it like I have a great idea, and they're not pitching all the time. They're making all the time, which is a totally different mindset than what we've seen from traditional production groups.
One of the hard things, one of the challenges across the board now, and not only in the U.S., just over in China, Shanghai Film Festival, talking to folks there, I think it's true in most countries, is on the one hand you have very large companies, behemoths like the majors. They're not very nimble, but they have a ton of money. They have large overhead and they're not nimble, but they have a ton of money and can weather a lot of storms. Then you have, at the other extreme, very nimble, very small companies that can't weather a lot of storms.